Good evening from Kentucky. My name is Andrew Jones, and I'm happy to present my market analysis on what I refer to as the Lake Forest parcel in Gaithersburg, Maryland. Now, before getting into the type of development use that I would recommend for this facility, I want to discuss the property condition and the topography of the area. Obviously, the biggest strength that plays in favor of any type of development for this parcel is its proximity to DC. It's within a 30-minute commute of one of the largest cities in the country, which is surrounded by both a large population in terms of residents and a large working, talented labor pool. The topography of the site is a little bit of a challenge that any developer is going to have to overcome. Located on the western side of Maryland, Gaithersburg is really in the foothills of the Appalachian mountain chain, which consequently creates a rolling hills and valley type of topography for the site. As far as residential and office space, that is not as big of a hurdle, but for retail, they really do best with a clear line of sight from the road, both for marketing and logistics purposes. So that is a challenge that any developer is going to have to overcome with this location. Some of the largest factors that really play into into the pro category for this site is site access. The location is within a very close proximity, about a looks like about a 45-second commute from I-270, one of the largest interstates servicing the metropolitan DC area. Surrounding the site, also on three sides, are three different regional arteries that bring in kind of all aspects of Montgomery County right here into Gaithersburg, which happens to be the center of the county, which also has some advantages as far as reaching your population. Going forward with the market analysis, I started out by defining the market areas that I thought would be best serviced by this facility. Now, the reason that you can see the subject property, and the reason that I didn't really continue the market area south of the subject property is because you run into the interstate. Now, in our research, interstates really serve as a man-made barrier for any type of development. Now, while it is obviously possible to get from one side of the interstate to the other, it does have a negative effect on retail users for this site, and it creates a competitive disadvantage for any type of development. The primary market area is going to be the closest to the site, and that's going to be kind of the easy market for the site to tap into. It doesn't really matter what goes on at this location, it's going to be directly impacting the surrounding properties within the primary market area. The secondary market area, in hindsight, could be expanded to cover pretty much all of the residential communities that you see in the screenshot here. All of these residential communities are going to come to this market or to the subject property for any type of amenity that we provide. And depending on the scope of the project, this is a very large parcel, it can easily become a regional hub servicing all of Montgomery County. When looking at our market analysis, we focused on 4 different development sectors. The first one I want to discuss is office space. Historically, as a suburb to DC, Gaithersburg and Montgomery County have been real hotbeds for office development. You can see that there is a little almost 4 million square feet of office space that's online right now. The most concerning aspect of our research is the vacancy rate, with almost 24% of office space vacant. And that's driven by 2 main points. The first is that there's been a push in the federal government to reduce reduce the size and scope of both personnel and budgets. The impact that has on Gaithersburg is pretty obvious. The government is the largest office occupier within the market. As leases start to expire, and as they look at various ways to cut costs and reduce their footage, that's having a negative effect on the office space. Surprisingly enough, there's a little over 5 million square feet of new office space under construction. And I'll go into that a little bit more in just a second. I want to point out, though, that the lack of metro stations to Gaithersburg, servicing the rest of DC Metro, is really kind of a deal killer for office development in this area. It's really not convenient to get to. Commuting every day is going to be a hassle on the interstate and on the bus lines. So until a metro line is brought to within walking distance of the site, I don't think it really has a competitive chance with other office suburban markets in the Gaithersburg area. Now, discussing the office space that's under construction, when doing our comparable observations of nearby office properties, it was revealed that a lot of the office space was built prior to 1970s. Now, when you look at office trends, they're growing pretty quickly, and it's hard for office to keep up. Office space is becoming irrelevant every day, changing with changes of technology, changing of working trends, even as far as saying the amount of square footage that employees occupy now is much lower than what it used to be. So as office space gets out of date, it creates a market for new space to come online. Now, unfortunately, with the projected job growth being really kind of at par in Gaithersburg with the rest of the country, and with the current vacancy online, I don't think that there's a way to build a office development that could be competitive with the already very cheap rates in the market. The next sector I want to discuss is residential. Gaithersburg is a suburb of DC, which means that it services a lot of residents. When we were breaking down how we would research the impact that a residential development would have on this site, you could see that there's a pretty hefty average rent spend on apartment communities, about $1,500 a month. That amount is pretty sufficient for a suburb. There also was a vacancy of 750 units. Now, another interesting aspect that came up in our research was that the residential sector is really kind of underserviced. A lot of the facilities that service the Gaithersburg area were built prior to 1980, which means that common amenities such as washer and dryer hookups, fitness facilities, security patrols, all of those are missing from the competition. And that leaves a very large window open for any type of developer that wants to come in and really be an attractive option for new residents looking in the market. Now, looking at the Gaithersburg area, it's surrounded by thousands of residential neighborhoods. Any type of development that involves residential, an apartment community or condo, it needs to be high density, and it needs to be very well thought out. Utilizing the whole space as a residential development it might be a sufficient use, but I would argue that it's not necessarily the highest and best use for this facility. Now, when looking at projected apartment demands based on the population, we can calculate that 1 and 2 bedrooms will be in the highest demand, which is a trend that we're seeing nationwide. 3, and this is for year 2020. You can also tell that there are no there's not a demand for studio apartments in this market, and that's something that was surprising to me. but it is what it is. I'm sure that the demand is not there because the rent rates are much lower than they are in the city, in urban areas, which is where you see studio apartments more prevalent. The next development sector we're going to discuss is retail. Due to the size of this parcel, retail development that is built really has the potential to service a very large regional area, more than just the 80,000 residents that live in Gaithersburg. It has a pretty wide population reach. So when you look at the 2015 sales and compare them to the 2020 projected sales, you can really tell what retail facilities are going to be in demand. Based on the calculations, clothing stores are going to be in the highest demand, followed by home goods, furniture, and appliances. It's interesting to note that grocery stores, restaurant, and alcohol facilities, they're all lacking in demand by 2020, which is going to face a problem for a developer. In a retail development, the anchor tenant is usually the tenant that's driving consumers to the development. And most of the time, that anchor development is a grocery store. So if there's not a demand for grocery space, then a developer is going to have to get pretty creative in finding another anchor tenant or finding a main attraction to say that would draw in consumers to this space. Finally, I want to talk about mixed use in that development sector for this facility. Now, there's a good way and there's a bad way to do mixed use. A mixed use development really needs to be cohesive, which means that all different parts really need to be working together and playing to their best strengths. There's obvious reasons why a pet grooming facility is not next door to a Class A office space. And that's a smaller scale, but when you're looking at the bigger scale, you need to design a facility, design a development that plays off of each other. For this case, looking at our greater market analysis for Gaithersburg, it's revealed that retail and residential are the two sectors that are in the highest demand. Now, coincidentally, retail and residential are both two sectors that work well together in a mixed-use environment. From an apartment complex perspective, residents like to live where they can play. And so close access to a grocery store, close access to a bar, personal service facilities, dry cleaners, salons, having all those facilities within walking distance is a huge advantage when you're a resident. Another interesting component that this plays is that there are facilities that are provided by a retail development that do not need to be provided by an apartment community when they're within a mixed-use development. The first obvious thing that comes to mind is a fitness center. If there's a gym in your retail space, you don't want to create a competing gym in your apartment community. You want your residents to go out to spend their money in the larger development as a whole. And from a retail's perspective, there are very clear advantages to having residents on site. Most importantly, you have an active and captive audience for all of your retail consumption. There's having that vibrancy, having that life there, it creates a kind of a guaranteed income for retailers, and it really could be a plus for a facility like the Lake Forest area. Finally, I want to go over the recommendation that I'm going to make to our developer in light of the market analysis. Now, as discussed, mixed-use facilities would be, in my opinion, the highest and best use. From an investment perspective, diversifying the development is a way to to take less of a risk on this facility. And I think that there's a lot of advantages to this space that could be capitalized on by mixed-use development. Now, when you're planning out the site, I think it's important that the retail component be as close to the regional arteries as possible within eyesight. That's going to be the prime real estate. That's going to be the part of the development that really needs to attract motorists and attract the larger population. With that in mind, I would recommend that the back south corner of the parcel be dedicated to a high density residential component. Now, all in all, I would recommend that the residential component take up anywhere from 30 to 35% of the development, with the rest remaining entirely for retail. A couple issues that you're going to have to keep in mind, both in the development and in the final stages, is the logistics of the property. Traffic flow is going to be a challenge, and if the facility is not adequately serving both the consumers and the residents, it's going to impact the performance on every metric. And also ensuring that utilities and the site is laid out to support both types of uses is going to be expensive, but ultimately I think will make a great development in the end. Thank you all for watching my presentation. I look forward to reviewing all of your comments and suggestions after this week's assignment is complete.